Hello everyone, welcome to a video about the quickest way, the fastest way, the best way to learn a new jazz tune. And I'm talking specifically about learning the chord changes, coming right up. I opened a Discord, a Gypsy Jazz coaching Discord, and I would ask you to join it. Not because you need coaching from me, but because I'm building a community there of people that are busy with studying and learning Gypsy Jazz. And I think it's important for everyone to be a part of it. And also there's options to get coaching with me one-on-one, but that's just an extra benefit of the Discord. I'd say the first thing is to be able to connect with other Gypsy Jazz students. And I consider myself to be one of them. And also, you never know what might happen with the Discord. Maybe I'm going to organize events and stuff like that. So join it, and I hope to see you there. Also, check out my legendary jazz league every day. Not the best name to remember, but I'm working on it very hard. It's the shorts; they're only 1 minute, and I'm making another one tomorrow. And I've already made 18 of them. If you were familiar with my channel for a while, you might be surprised at the way it looks right now, because I haven't made a video in this style for a long time. For this video, I'm going back to the time I was streaming on Twitch. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to stream on Twitch, but that means I'm going to make a similar style video that I was making back then. Because if I wasn't streaming on Twitch, I was actually streaming to YouTube, hidden. And then I would download the video and would edit it very lightly, just making some extra graphics that I felt were needed on screen, maybe get the sound level to the correct volume level, and maybe some work on the color grading, but not much else, not much editing into my speech. I would make mistakes talking. I might make a mistake playing. It didn't matter. It was kind of a live stream, lightly edited. And someone remarked on my channel, not only someone, but more people, that they missed those, you might call them rambling videos, where I was just kind of riffing on a topic that I chose and I didn't really specifically prepare it. I might have some bullet points, but it wasn't scripted. I wasn't editing my audio. I wasn't taking out all the uhs. So I might say a lot in this video, and I am going to say kind of a lot, because I noticed that when I was looking at those videos, but I did enjoy those videos. It was very casual, and I got away from that format, and I was heavily editing my videos, scripting it. And those videos are great, don't get me wrong, but I'm going back to that older format, and I have good reason to do so, because I do have a heavily edited format as well, which are my shorts. So if you haven't watched those, I'm making a short every day, showing you a new lick, a new concept, showing that lick slowly, and then also playing it inside a solo, so you can hear it in a musical context. So I'm making one every day, but not today, because today I'm making this longer form video. And because I do have that heavily edited format, I can make a more casual format for my longer videos. So that means that I have my microphone back in the screen. It's really a streamer microphone, a blue Ember. And I have my headphones, so I can hear everything, and I can monitor all the sounds, because I can put stuff on the screen. I don't have to edit it later. I can just put a graphic on screen and get rid of it. And I can start in my bumpers, stuff like that. Very easy for me in post, but it requires some setup, but that's not a problem. And I'm basically streaming it to a recorder, and then I will very lightly edit it. Not much in the speech, but for instance, the microphone, the battery of my camera might die. Then I have to change batteries, and then I will edit out, of course, the empty space there. But that's it. Not much more. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to learn chord changes to a new tune. And the reason I'm making it is because of this experience I had 3 weeks ago when I was teaching during a great Gypsy Jazz workshop week or camp together with Stochler Rosenberg and Paul Schaefer. And I was there teaching a lot of students from different levels, from beginner level to really advanced levels, talking about licks, tricks, chords, comping, rhythm, everything you can think of. We discussed so many topics. And one of those topics was based on situations that happened during jams, because there were lots of jams, about learning a new tune on the spot and how to do that and how to remember those tunes so that you don't have to read all the time. Right? I'm not against learning a tune from a chart. In fact, that's the way I prefer to learn a tune, by reading a chart. It's because the way my brain works. I like to see the chords, see the chord names, but then I only have to look at it maybe for one course, maybe two courses if it's a lot of chords. But after that, I remembered it. So people noticed that, and they were like, "Okay, how do you remember a tune that quickly?" Or how did you learn all those tunes? Because actually that didn't happen a lot, because I know most tunes. But they asked me, like, how did you remember so many tunes? And the reason for that is because I don't memorize every chord separately, but I use bigger formulas. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to make a list of all those formulas, and also some mnemonic devices, some words, some phrases that will trigger a certain response in your brain or in your fingers, and that will enable you to memorize tunes fast. So I made a list, and let's just go over them one by one, and I'll put them on the screen as well. So the first formula you have to learn is 2-5-1s. And you might say, well, I already know 2-5-1s, I know what it is. I can calculate every 2-5-1 you would throw at me. But I'm not talking in that way. I'm talking about learning the 2-5-1s as a sentence. Just like learning the tables. I always ask the person that is asking me about, like how much is 5 times 6? And they would say 30 without thinking about it. Or 6 times 8, 48. And it's not because they're calculating 1 times 6 plus 6 is 12, and then add another 6, that would be 80. No, they just learned 6 times 8 is 48 as a sentence, right? It's just something they learned the words of. To give them information, to enable them to access that information quickly. And that's the way I think you should learn 2-5-1s, or actually every formula on this list. But let's start with 2-5-1s. So you should be able to just say 2-5-1 in G is A minor 7, D7, G6. That's something I know as a sentence, right? 2-5-1 E flat, F minor 7, B flat 7, E flat 6. Or E flat, you just say E flat, you don't have to say E flat 6. Because it could also be E flat major 7, of course. 2-5-1 in A flat, B flat minor 7, E flat 7, A flat. And this is even in English, it's not my native tongue, right? So I learned it in 2 languages. I learned to say the sentence in Dutch, which is my native language, and to say it in English. That's for communication purposes. But you should learn it in your native language. Learn the 2-5-1s as a sentence. First in major, and then in minor. Now, the only thing that will change in minor is that instead of minor 7 for the 2 chord and 7 for the 5 chord, it's going to be half diminished for the 2 chord and still 7 for the 5 chord. So let's say 2-5-1 E minor, F sharp, half diminished, or you could say F sharp minor 7 flat 5, but let's just say half diminished, B7 E minor. And just memorize, if you don't know this, if you don't know the 2-5-1s like this, like sentences, just memorize 2 a week, you know? And there's only 12. So in 6 weeks or 2 months or 1.5 months, you will have memorized them. And you can do that while taking a walk, taking a shower, cooking, doing the dishes, driving to your work. Just memorize, just say them over and over and over again, so that you don't have to calculate. Because if you start calculating, let's say I'm saying a 2-5-1 in G flat minor, you have to calculate, G flat minor, so then I'll take the harmonic minor scale, so the second note would be A flat. So A flat half diminished, and then, the 5 chord, so G flat, A flat, what's B flat. So then you even have to think about the scale, and then you arrive at D flat, but you're not completely sure. That happens like D flat 7, they would say to me, is it D flat 7? No. Now you're calculating, you have to know. A flat half diminished, D flat 7, G flat minor. That's the 2-5-1 in G flat minor. So that's the first formula. So let's go to the next formula. And after I've explained all of these things, I'm going to give some example songs, example tunes. So the second thing you have to memorize is the circle of fourths. Now, I usually say the circle of fifths going down or to the left side, but that's confusing for a lot of people because they always think going up. Okay, then it's the circle of fourths, because the circle of fourths going up is the same thing as the circle of fifths going down. So that means you have to memorize these notes: C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, B, E, A, A, D, G, C. Well, yeah, I was messing up, but I'm doing it on camera. But you have to just memorize this as a sentence. In fact, there are sentences that you can memorize that have the starting letter for each word. I don't know them because I just learned it like this. And why do you have to learn this? That's because of something in tunes called dominant chains. Right? Dominant chains are just chains of dominance, right? They might start on B flat 7, and then you get B flat 7, E flat 7, A flat 7, D flat 7, something like that. And you have to learn that because this will happen in tunes. So if you can just say to yourself, okay, now it's a dominant chain starting on D7, ending on C, then you know already 4 chords, right? Because you know, oh, D7, G7, C, or 3 chords. Right? If it would end on F, then you would have, 4 chords, right? I would put a graphic in post showing you a dominant chain, let's say starting on, let's say it's a bridge of a rhythm changes, so it's a rhythm changes in C. Oh, I forgot to put the circle of fourths on the screen, so there, circle of fourths. So it's a rhythm changes in C, so then the bridge is a dominant chain starting on E7 and going back to C. So it's E7, A7, D7, G7, because you just memorized the circle of four starting on any note. That's important. Okay, then the next thing you have to memorize is turnarounds. Also 1, 6, 2, 5. But turnarounds can be different formulas. But it's basically what happens at the end of most tunes. So let's say you have a tune in C, then you would get, maybe the tune ends with a 2, 5, 1 in C, right? 2, 5, 1 in C, D minor 7, G7, C, and then it's a turnaround. So the turnaround can be different things, but let's say it's 1, 6, 2, 5, so then it becomes C, 6, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7. It could also be C6, 1 bar, and then 2 bars, 2 beats F7, F6, and 2 beats C7. Or it could be C6, A7, D minor 7, G7. Just learn a couple, but start with a 1, 6, 2, 5. So another example in the key of E flat would be E flat, C minor 7, F minor 7, B flat 7. So it's also the circle of fifths, if you think about it, starting on C minor, right? C, F, B flat. And it's also a 2, 5, 1 in E flat if you start from the F minor 7, B flat 7. So if you first learn the 2, 5, 1s and then the circle of fifths, then a turnaround like 1, 6, 2, 5 will be very easy to remember. Next thing you have to learn are Christophe changes. Now this name, I'm not sure it's a good name or if it's a correct name, but it's a name that's usually used in gypsy jazz. And that's the final 8 bars of many tunes, but for example, could be the final 8 bars of All of Me. And it always starts on the 4 chords. So in All of Me, that's F. And then the second chord can be different chords. But just learn 2 varieties. It could be either raised 4, so there would be F sharp diminished, so F, F sharp diminished. Or it could be a 4 chord minor, so that would be F, F minor, 6, or even F minor 7. That's the one that happens in All of Me. So it gets 1, 4, then 4 minor, then goes back to 1. Then we get the 6th chord as a dominant, so A7 in C, and then a 2, 5, 1. And the 2 can either be a dominant chord, like D7, or just 2, 5, 1, D minor 7. So you just have to learn those Christophe changes in every key. So let's say the tune is in B flat, so then the Christophe changes start on E flat, do raised 4, E diminished, back to 1, E flat, B flat, then a 6th chord is dominant G7, and then a 2, 5, 1 in B flat. So E flat, E diminished, B flat, G7, 2, 5, 1. And the 2 chord can also be dominant. So then you would get E flat, E diminished, B flat, G7, C7, F7. Also notice that G7, C7, F7 is a dominant chain. Right, so all of these things work together. Now you have to learn this in every key. And again, not calculating, but just know it by heart. And if you've already learned 2-5-1s, circle of fifths, then this will be almost automatic. But something to realize, okay, these are called Christophe changes. Now there are different variations, but you can learn the variations when you learn a tune with new Christophe changes. With a new variation, you would just learn, oh, it's just Christophe changes, but this thing happens. Next thing you should learn is the 2 different diminished chords that are possible in a tune. The first one is the 1 diminished, or raised 4 diminished. And that's the diminished chord that has the root of the key you're in it. So for example, it's also a good example song, but let's say 1 diminished. Let's say Embraceable You in the key of, let's do G. So then the second chord, so it starts on G, is B flat diminished. That is that 1 diminished chord, because the B flat diminished has a G in it, right? So the G, so that's the main key, is in that diminished chord. Now the B flat's in the bass, but that is not really important to know, because you can put every note in the bass. I could also put the G in the bass, right? Or a C sharp. Doesn't really matter, especially on guitar. When you can just play higher voicings, then you can just play this voicing and it's fine. Let the bass player worry about the bass note. And the other diminished chord is a what I call an ascending diminished chord. It's a diminished chord that doesn't have the root in it, or the 1 chord note, but it's resolving up. So let's say we're in the key of G. The G sharp diminished, there's no G in it, and it goes up to A minor. So I would just call that the ascending diminished chord, and the other one is the 1 diminished chord. Okay, next formula to know is, now we get to mnemonic devices. So the first one is go back. And go back means that you go back to a certain chord that was earlier in the tune. And you would use that if it's not part of any of the formulas that we're talking about. So for example, All of Me, right? It starts on C, and then it's E7. Now you have to remember it's E7 because it's not part of a formula. So you have to remember, E7, it's a 5-1. It's a start of a dominant chain starting on E7 to A7, and the dominant chain ends on D minor. But now we have to go back to E7 because it's not part of a formula. So, and you will be surprised at how often you can use this go back thing. So go back to E7, right? You have to remember E7 in the first place anyway, because it's the start of the dominant chain. But then you have to you can also use that as, go back to E7. And then it's just 5-1 to A minor. And then it's a dominant chain, D7, G7. Next mnemonic device would be but, or maybe you could call it remember or focus. And that's when you have an odd chord in the tune that is not part of a formula and you cannot just go back. Then you have to say, but remember, there's an A7 there. Remember the A7. Or it could be remember something odd about the formula itself, like Christophe changes with a change, right? For instance, if you look at the tune All the Things You Are, that's in A flat, right? So then it ends with Christophe changes, starting on D flat. Then we get D flat minor, that's still normal, but now, instead of going back to A flat, it goes to C minor. So you have to say, it's Christophe changes, but instead of the 1 chord, we go to C minor, and then we go to B flat diminished. So you have to remember 2 things there, and then it's just 2-5-1, it's normal. Another example would be Embraceable You. The ending of Embraceable You is C, and then there's a 2-5 to E minor. But now it's A7. Remember the A7, right? So you have to remember the A7 because it's not part of a formula, because it's not part of a formula. In fact, there is a whole part you have to use that because it's A7, and then it's 1, and then it's a 2-5, but the 2 is a half diminished chord. So you have to remember the A7, and you have to remember goes back to 1, and then it's a 2-5-1 to G, but the 2 is a half diminished chord. So these are all the formulas. I'm thinking, is there any other mnemonic device I use? No, this is it. So now let's look at some tunes and use all of these devices. So the first tune I wanted to look at, I don't even have the chart in front of me, but let's get the chart just for fun. So let's look at the tune Some of These Days, which is a tune that came up during the camp and jam sessions. Well, this is one of my favorite tunes, so of course I know it. But it's a lot of chords to remember, and it might seem impossible to be able to remember this after looking at it once or twice. But if you know all of these formulas, and with knowing them, again, I mean, you could say them as sentences. You don't have to calculate. Then it becomes very easy. So it starts with a 5-1 to, oh yeah, let's do it in the key of G. So it's in F here. So let's do the key of G, because that's the normal key for gypsy jazz people. And I'll put a chart on the screen, which I didn't prepare, but I'll put a chart on the screen in post. So the first chord is B7, right? But you have to, you don't want to remember chord by chord, you want to remember formula. So the tune is in G, but it doesn't start in G. So instead of trying to remember that it starts on B7 going to the 6th chord, I'm just gonna pretend it's in E minor. And then it's a 5-1 to E minor twice, 5-1. And every chord lasts 2 bars. So. Could be E minor. Usually I actually just play E minor. So I play like B7, just do a straight E minor. That sounds better. Or E minor 6. So instead of remembering 4 chords, right, 4 separate chords, I'm just remembering 5-1 to E minor twice. Every chord lasts 2 bars. But in this tune, every chord lasts 2 bars, except for, and there we get the but we'll get there. So then we go to E7. So what I could remember is the E minor changes to E7, same root. And then we get a dominant chain, starting on E7, ending on C. We get E7, A7, D7, G7, ending on C6. But the A7 lasts 4 bars. So there we get the but or the remember, right? That's the mnemonic device. So again, 2 times 5-1 to E minor. Then the E minor changes to E7. We get a dominant chain ending on C6, but the A7 lasts 4 bars. The rest is 2 bars. So let's play that. So B7, E minor, 5-1 to E minor. Again. Now the E minor changes to E7, and now we get a dominant chain. So A7, but the A7 lasts 4 bars. 3, 4, D7. We still continue the dominant chain. G7, and now we get C6 to end the dominant chain. What happens now? We go back to E7. We had to remember the E7 in the beginning anyway. The E minor changed to E7. Now we go back to E7, and that is immediately the beginning of a 5-1 to A minor. So we memorized the largest part of the tune very easily by 5-1 to E minor. E minor changes to E7, that's a dominant chain going to C, but the A7 lasts 4 bars. Then we go back to E7, and that's a 5-1 to A minor. And the last 8 bars, you've guessed it, it's Christophe changes. And it's a normal kind of Christophe changes with only the second chord is the raised 4, the diminished chord, and the 2-5-1 is a dominant chain. But we can also just play normal 2-5-1. So let's play the whole tune, and I'll be saying all the formulas while I'm playing it. So starting with a 5-1 to E minor twice, let's play E minor 6, and then the E minor 6 chart changes to E7, and then it's a dominant chain. E7, dominant chain, but the A7 lasts 4 bars. 2, 3. Continue the dominant chain. Now it's gonna end on C6. Go back to E7, and it's a 5-1 to A minor. Now Christophe changes, starting on C. Easy to remember. Let's do a more difficult tune. Let's do Embraceable You. I'm not gonna even get the chart, right? So I'm just walk you through it. But maybe I'll put the chart on the screen. Or not, let's not put the chart on the screen. Just learn it like this, like I would do it in a jam session. Or you can get the chart in a jam session. I don't mind that, but I'm just gonna talk you through it this time. So it starts on the 1 chord, G. Then we get this 1 diminished. And there's B flat in the bass, but that's less important because you could also just play this. I don't mind. Then it's 2-5 to G. But the G never, but, you have a but. Remember, but the G never comes there because we get 2-5, but then immediately again a 2-5 to G. And then it resolves to G. So G, 1 diminished, 2-5, but doesn't resolve, we get another 2-5. And then it resolves to G. Every chord that's 1 bar. So. But now here comes something that we didn't talk about yet. This 2-5 is different, the second one. Instead of D7, it's C minor 6. So that's another thing you could add to the formulas. I didn't prepare it, but sometimes that 5 chord is substituted by a 4 minor chord. It doesn't happen in every tune, it happens in this tune. So it's C minor 6 or F7, which is the same chord. So, and people call that the backdoor dominance. But just important to remember that that is just a C minor chord, C minor 6 chord. So this second 2-5, even though it's still a 2-5 theoretically, but the 5 chord is there substituted by a backdoor dominant or by a 4 minor chord, C minor 6. And then it goes back to G. Now we get a quick 2-5 to E minor. With quick, I mean that every chord has 2 beats. So F sharp half diminished, B7, E minor. E minor 7 is fine. And now we get a quick 2-5 to B minor. So C sharp half diminished, F sharp 7, B minor 7. And then we get a quick 2-5 to the key of D major. Right? There's a lot to remember, but let's go over it again. So 1 chord, 1 diminished, B flat in the bass, 2-5, doesn't resolve, another 2-5, but the 5 chord there, but, remember, the 5 chord is substituted by a 4 minor, now it resolves to 1. Quick 2-5 to E minor, quick 2-5 to B minor, quick 2-5 to D. Let's play it until there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Doesn't resolve, 4 minor, quick 2-5 to E minor, quick 2-5 to B minor. It's difficult to talk and play, especially when the chord moves this quickly. So I'm not going to talk, just play it. 1, 2, 3, 4. D major. And now we get a turnaround in D major. So how do you play the turnaround? You could play 6, right? B minor, 2, 5. But actually with the melody, there is a G there. So then it's better to play B7. So I would say it's a turnaround or 1, 6, 2, 5. But the 6 is a B7 chord, a 7 chord. Or you could even play. Could you play diminished? Well, you could play diminished. You could even play B minor actually. No, that's not nice. No, I don't like the B minor 7, but you could maybe play diminished. So D sharp diminished. That's a rising diminished chord, right? 2, 5. So you could call it a turnaround, but a turnaround is usually at the end of a tune or at the end of an A part, but that's not the case here. So you could also just say it's 1, 6, 2, 5 or 1, ascending diminished chord, 2-5. Da 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 da. Doesn't resolve to D, but now we get in 2-5 to G. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. 2-5 to G. Da 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 da. And then we had the second half of the tune. Second half of the tune, same. Da 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 da. Now this second 2-5 with the weird 5 chord, which is substituted by 4 minor, doesn't resolve to the 1, but instead goes to a 2-5 to C. Now with the last 8 bars, it's a little bit like Christophe Changes, but it isn't. So I wouldn't actually remember Christophe Changes. I would just say 2-5 to C, and then it's a quick 2-5 to E minor. And now we have to remember A7. And then we get a 1-2-5-1. But the 2 chord is a half diminished chord. So you see, this tune is just difficult to remember. It's even difficult for someone like me who knows all those formulas called. Still, because there are so many buts, and remember this. But it's much easier than if you would have to remember every chord, because then it's impossible to remember this tune. So let's play through it again, and maybe I'll say some things, not too much, because it's confusing me. So here we go. 1 dim, 2-5, another 2-5, but now 4 minor, 2-5 to E minor, 2-5 to B minor, 2-5 to D, dim, 2-5 to G, 1 dim, 2 is the same as the beginning. Now we get 2-5 to C, 2-5 to E minor quick. Remember the A7, and now we get 1, 2, half diminished. Difficult tune to remember, right? And there's lots of tunes that are difficult to remember in this way. I mean, Stella Bar Starlight, Argentine, but most tunes actually are very easy to remember. So let's do an easy tune to end the video. Let's do, let's do There Will Never Be Another You, which is not super easy, but it's easier than this one. So that's an E flat. Starts on the 1 chord, then we get a 2-5 to C minor. Then we get a 2-5 to A flat. So let's play it until there. Da, 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 da. 2-5 to C minor. 2-5 to A flat. Now this A flat turns into minor, and then back to 1. Right, so until there, it's pretty easy, right? 2-5 to C minor, 2-5 to A flat. The A flat turns into, turns into would be another mnemonic device. I will add that in post. That's a good mnemonic device to use. The A flat major turns into A flat minor, then back to the 1 chord. We get a 1-6, 2-5, but the 2 chord is a dominant chord. So 6-2, but as dominant chord. And then B flat. So you could also say, okay, so it's 1-6-2, but the 2 is a dominant chord, and then it's a dominant chain, because B flat 7 right after it, 2-1. So you could also say 1-6-2-5, but the 2 is a dominant chord, or you could say 1-6 and then dominant chain starting in F7. Whatever is easier. I think for me here, probably just remember 1-6-2-5, but the 2 is dominant chords, and also the 2-5 each lasts 2 bars. Some people like to play F7 and then just 2-5. So in that case, I would remember 1-6-2, 2 is dominant chord, and then it's a 2-5 to E flat. So let's play it from the beginning. 2-5 to C minor, 2-5 to A flat. The A flat turns into A flat minor. 1. 6, 2 as dominant chord, last 2 bars. Let's do 2-5 to A flat, E flat. Second half. 2-5 to C minor. Same, right? 2-5 to A flat. A flat turns into A flat minor, back to 1. And now you just have to remember it's a 2-5. Well, you have to remember everything. But here's a 2-5 to G minor. And then there's something weird, which you have to remember. It's just G minor, D7, G minor. And then it's... what's that? So how would I remember that? You know what? I would actually just remember, maybe you, instead of remembering G minor, D7, G minor, you could also remember another formula that we didn't talk about, but which happens a lot. Something that you might add. It's the descending minor formula. Something that sounds like this, right? It's that minor chord progression where the root descends down. So you get G, F sharp, D, G minor, G minor major 7, G minor 7, G minor 6. You get, happens in many tunes. I call it the minor walkdown. You could call it that. So that's what happens here. That's easiest to remember. And then it's just a 2-5-1 to E flat. So let's do the final part. So you get a 2-5 to G minor, then the minor walkdown. And if you know minor walkdowns, you automatically know I can substitute it by 1, 5, 1, 4. 1 as F G minor is 1. 1, 5, 1, 4 as a dominant chord. That's the same. That's a minor walkdown. It's a good formula to know. And then it's 2-5-1 to E flat. So let's play the whole tune. 2-5 to C minor. 2-5 to A flat. A flat turns into A flat minor. 1, 6, 2 as a dominant chord. And then 2-5 back to E flat. Second half, 2-5 to C minor. 2-5 to A flat. Turns into A flat minor. 2-5 to G minor. Walk down. Right? Or play 2-5 to E flat. Now I've said a lot of chords went really quickly, but that's the way I do these rambling videos. But I promise you, if you learn the formulas that are on screen right now, which are even more than I thought beforehand, then this process will become so much easier than you think it is. And I went over some really complicated tunes, but so many tunes are so much easier, and you remember them instantly just by looking at them once. Now, the hard work is learning all these formulas. And again, you have to learn them as sentences, not calculating. But if you start, and I've said this already many times, but I'm going to say it again. If you start with the 2-5-1s and the circle of fifths, then all the other formulas, they will flow from it. And they will be much easier to learn than the first two. It's going to be hard work to remember the 2-5-1s and the circle of fifths in a way that you can just say them without even thinking. You know, I was stumbling when I said the circle of fifths. But in general, that shouldn't happen. So maybe I should recite it a couple more times. And then after you've done that, next time you have to learn a tune, then it will be so easy. So how much time is it going to take you to learn the circle of fifths and the 2-5-1s? Let's just assume that you don't know them at all. I'm guessing to be able to recite them like sentences without thinking, if you work on it every day for, let's say, 15 minutes, it's going to take you maybe 2 to 3 months, I say. If you do it every day, at the most, half a year to get them really fluent. So this might seem like a long time, but it's actually not a long time. Because after that, learning new tunes, it's going to become almost instant. And that's worth it. Now, for some people, it might go even faster, right? If you have a good brain for memorizing sentences, then you might be able to do it in a month. So go do it. I promise you, it will be worth it. So there was nothing in this video about licks or anything, but it's important. Hopefully, I will see you in the next video, which could be a short, or I will see you in Discord, or I could see you in one of these rambling videos, because I'll probably make more in the future. Bye.